And we're back, everybody. I am so thrilled to share with you my guest today, Jayne Buxton. Jayne, welcome to Awakening Aphrodite. Finally, we made it, my friend.
We did. It's been a long time scheduling, but we did. I'm so happy that we made it this time. Thank you.
Well, I have to say, you're another guest that I knew I wanted you on the show, but then as I researched you and the more I dug into your work and all the different facets of your work, the more I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have her on at least 6 times. You're just like a wealth of information that I'm thrilled to share with my audience. Today, I definitely want to unpack the great plant-based con and your work on that with your investigative journalism duties. And if we have time, we can get into ending the mother war, starting at work, because you've got 4 books, 2 novels, 2 fictions and 2 nonfictions. So we'll see how the time goes. This is just a caveat, everyone. If we're just flowing with all of it, we might have Jayne back and do due diligence for the very important work on mothers at work, which I know is hitting home for a lot of us. So again, Jayne, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I did talk a little bit about you in the intro, but did you want to just give a little snippet for the audience today in your own words, kind of just a little bit of your backstory and what brought you to go ahead and write the great plant-based con?
Yeah, well, you've done a good job of setting it up a little bit. I've been writing books for a good 20-something years, and I had a nonfiction book, then I moved into fiction, then I found this subject. Before that, I was a management consultant, trained as an MBA, doing really investigative work within corporations, trying to figure out why they weren't working and how to fix them or aspects of them. So that was very much a organizational and data-based career. So some people have said, well, what is the shift and how can you make that shift between the one career and the next? And I think the connection is curiosity and data. So if I see data that isn't working for me or isn't consistent with other aspects of data or narratives that don't fit with data, for instance, then I want to get into that and write about it. And as you said, that happened the first time with ending the mother war. We're not going to focus on that right now, but the reason I honed in on this subject about the plant-based con was because in 2019, I gradually began to see that the data wasn't fitting the narrative. Basically, that was the trigger for me. And there were a couple of aspects of data that didn't fit. One was the story that was being put about emissions and the extent to which livestock was responsible for climate change. That was one piece that wasn't fitting. And the other was all what I saw to be misinformation around the nutrition elements of the argument, and the argument being meat's bad for you. Meat will kill you. Meat will give you a heart attack. Meat will give you cancer, all of those things. And I knew those things not to be true. And the more I dug, the more I found data that proved that they weren't true. And that's when I said about writing the book. It really was late in 2019 that all came together really for me I couldn't not write it, basically.
2019, and now we're recording this in 2025. So, any updates? What would you say has happened, kind of in a nutshell, since then? Has the data grown? Has it changed? Is it magnified? Or what would you say now?
So that's really interesting because it even changed during the 2 to 3 years that I was actually writing the book too. So I would say that there was more and more information validating the benefit of meat for health, and more information leading us to question its bad impact, its negative impact on the environment. So the information was getting more prolific, but the argument persisted. The narrative, the mainstream narrative, if I can call it that, is what persisted and was getting stronger. So the voices,
like the original
argument calling for veganism was getting stronger and stronger. And then I think last year there was a slight turn. So 2024, the beginning of, I saw a slight shift backwards again. And I think more people were beginning to pay attention to the counter arguments to the mainstream narrative. And so, we have something here called Veganuary. I don't know if you have that where you are, which is, a call for people to go vegan for 1 month every January. And it's quite a big campaign. It's backed by lots of advertising, and corporations sometimes get involved in producing products for that month. And 2021, 22, 23, it was pretty loud, that campaign, and people were climbing on board. They were trying the month's worth of vegan eating. Last year, it was very quiet. So 2024 was very, very quiet. We hardly noticed it. And I think that also coincided with a little bit of a slide in the commercial credentials and success of those companies that had started to produce vegan products. So that was another factor that was happening. A lot of those companies started to go out of business, or they started to decide to add meat as well as their other lines in restaurants, for example. So that's all to say that I detected a slight shift back in favor of the truth back in 2024. I don't know what's happening now in the sense of, is that permanent? Is that going to hold? I do think people are a little bit wiser, ordinary people, you, me, mothers, fathers who are feeding their kids, people who are feeding themselves, are a little bit wiser to the truth. The problem is, I think policymakers are still on that other track. They're still really hammering home the plant-based is a must kind of message. So we've got all these different conflicting movements, as it were, right now, I think, taking place.
Yes, and then on top of that, we've got the globalism going on, and the climate engineering and quote unquote climate change, and blaming animal emissions and cow farts and all this stuff is like causing global warming and carbon sequestering, and it's just like it's gotten so convoluted, and I feel like everything is coming together with weaponized compassion on people. Like the powers that be are taking advantage of human nature and having compassion for living things, and everybody wanting to be a good person and do the right thing, and everybody wanting to have a healthy, happy life and wishing the same for others. And, I feel like that's being exploited by people who don't have scruples, who don't have morals, and really don't, frankly, have a conscience and don't care about exploiting that. Because you must have heard a million times, and I have too, in my over 3-decade career in holistic health and nutrition, people who are like, well, I'm vegan because I love animals and I don't want to hurt animals. And of course, you see what's really happening in conventional commercial feedlots. They're not treating animals humanely. They're not farming according to permaculture principles and respect for the animals like it's always been, and all that kind of stuff. And there's just such a mishmash going on of, again, conflicting motives and people twisting things around and taking advantage of people's good nature. And before I ask you what you would say to that vegan who says that, do you have any thoughts on what I just said?
I do. And in fact, I think that the compassion for animals was historically exploited, and that became stronger. But now what's being exploited is our compassion for the planet.
Yes.
In its broader sense. So that the emphasis on climate change is being used to hammer livestock farmers and meat eaters and those who believe that animal foods are essential to human life. So, and particularly net zero is being used. So we have these net zero targets. Every country has them. And it's like any target system. What happens is the perverse reactions are set in place to meet those targets. And the perverse reaction is that everyone's scrambling to get their net zero down, to get to meet net zero. The only way to do that in a fossil fuel world is to use farmers, because farmers are the only sector that can sequester carbon, right? So if a factory wants to get to net zero, it has to either purchase carbon credits from that farm, which isn't a very well-established system, or it has to purchase land from that farm, plant some trees on it, and claim that it is therefore sequestering carbon to offset its own activities. So that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but it does represent this system, which is farmers are being scapegoated in order to save other sectors and to give them the tools that they need to meet net zero. And I think it's profoundly unjust that that is happening. And we really do need to arm farmers with the information, the tools to fight back, because this is their livelihoods. This is our food supply. There are a lot of things at stake here. And we can talk a little bit more about what tools they might need, but I definitely think you're right that compassion for the planet is now what's being exploited.
Yes. And my goodness, what person with a heart wouldn't want to contribute to that and change their behavior to not hurt the planet and the bees and the trees and all the innocent life? I mean, it's really diabolical. But one thing, though, I just think I want to hit home for the audience, just for my own conscience, that we really have to be conscious for whatever argument we make for our diets and our friends and our family, that there is a big difference between properly raising plants and animals and conventional methods. You know, we can't put that together. So when someone's claiming a way of eating based on a moral principle of what you feel is right, that's wonderful. But there's different types of raising plants and animals that are done in different ways. So I just, for my own peace of mind, I would want to hit that home for people. They're not the same, you know?
No, they're not the same. But we do need to remember that 90%, it's almost 90% of the beef, for example, in the world comes from non-exploitative systems, I would say, so non-feedlot systems.
Really? I'm surprised it's that high.
Those, now, most of the most exploitative systems are in, say, the chicken industry, the poultry industry. So that's where we have to do a lot of work, and that's where people are right to be concerned about these massive complexes stuffed full of birds that are not treated very well.
There's no humaneness in it. It's like this is a living creature, and they actually don't refer to them even as like the animal or the chicken or whatever. I was reading the other day. I mean, you might know the term for it. It's like a product unit, or like they objectify the living creature, whether it be the cow, the chicken, the whatever, and they call it like a unit of production or something, and then they UOP or something, they abbreviate it, so they remove the life force from it to make it easier for their conscience to, not treat it well. It's unbelievable. I mean, that's just mind control right there.
Yeah, yeah. That is true. And I think for that reason, going forward, if we were to have an ideal farming system for poultry, for instance, that would mean much less poultry consumed. We have to face that fact, because you can't raise chickens in a humane way and have the same volume that we have now. And actually, most of the meat eaten in North America and probably our country, the UK too, is white meat. We've because since the 60s, we've done a very good job of painting red meat as bad for us and white meat as good for us. So that is what's happened. The other point that's worth making, though, is, a farmer friend of mine who's also written another book called Why Vegans Have Smaller Brains, which is also a catchy title.
Yeah, I've heard that actually. Yep.
Anyway, they have a phrase which is, okay, people say meat is murder, and that is in one literal sense, you could say that's true, but wheat is murder too. Okay. So when you are eating anything which is wheat-based or plant-based that's grown in a monocrop system, which most of our food is, our plant-based food is, you have the collateral damage of many, many forms of life. Some have estimated 25 times more sentient life killed for a kilo of plant protein compared to a kilo of animal protein. So you're killing the mice, the voles, the gophers, the deer who are destroying the crops. You're destroying the insects, and then because of the insects being destroyed, you're destroying the bird life that feeds on the insects, and then the bird life that feeds on them. So there's that whole cycle, which actually inconveniently must be faced with our food production systems. And I would suggest we also need to be eliminating a lot of that too, especially with the pesticide use, insecticide use, fertilizers, which also destroy life under the soil. That all of these things must be factored into our decisions and our moral framework.
And it's funny that I'm so glad you brought up that point, Jayne. That is such a critical point, that there's actually more death and destruction or for plant-based crops, like even almonds, and even the water required for almond crops is like 20 million times. Of course, I'm being hyperbolic, but it's a lot higher than other crops. And it's like, people who are, taking the moral road of I'm a vegan because of this and that. I just think that they're not fully informed. But then again, this seems to be what's happening pervasively across cultures for anything that goes against what you're hearing on Fox News, CNN, NBC, in the New York Times, blah, blah, blah. This is just anything that's against that you're not hearing about. So these well-meaning people are, again, they're compassionate, beautiful people. They just don't have the whole story.
That's right.
I think that's part of why my show even exists, to hopefully, I'm all about informed consent. We can't make intelligent, wise decisions if we don't have all the information.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, it's been, purposefully withheld from us. But I'm so grateful for amazing women like you, because my show, Awakening Aphrodite, and my online course and membership, Goddess Rising, is about trying to bring positive female role models who are the warrior, who are the goddess, who are the wise woman, the women that younger women can look up to and learn from and aspire to be like, because they're out there. It's just for some reason, we're not hearing about them.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful.
And one of those other women who I should have noted earlier, she was one of the people that got me started on my own book, was Nina Teicholz. I don't know if you've interviewed her or not.
Nina.
So I think she's a good one for your list, because she was an investigative journalist of the highest order, and she wrote a book in 2014 called The Big Fat Surprise.
Okay.
And she was the first one to blow the lid on our understanding of fat. And I say this because you're talking about women having false information, and boy, have women been persuaded over several decades about fat being terrible for them. And particular types of fat, right? Animal fat, butter, that saturated fat. So she blows the lid on this, and it's a fantastic book. And that opened my eyes when I read that book. I didn't read it till 2018, but I read it and I thought, wow, if this is happening in this field, imagine it's probably happening elsewhere. Exactly. And Nina is a warrior, and she is she's a PhD as well, and she does a lot of research into the dietary guidelines and how they are falsified based on very weak studies and a poor understanding of those studies. And she has been battling away at this argument about the guidelines for at least a decade. And that's a warrior. That's what we need, as you say. I think we've got men warriors, we've got female warriors, and just making a dent in the truth, pushing forward a little bit, each person a little bit.
I love it. I'm
necessary.
going to, at the end of the show, I'm going to ask you for her information for sure. Thank you. And, your role as an investigative journalist, I think it's just such an important job. And it's just so, can you share with us a little bit about that journey? Because you're uncovering, I'm sure you're coming up against roadblocks. I'm sure you're coming up against, like even me in my industry, what I'm trying to do, like I just mentioned, like I get really upset. And, it's like sometimes even doing the research, I physically, like my body's suffering and my health is starting to suffer personally because of these emotions that are going through my body all the time, because I get very, very upset when I think people are being hoodwinked. And you're coming across it. So just how's that working for you? Like, how are you handling it? How are you channeling it to a positive good? Like, give us some tips, because we're all dealing with a lot of this right now. And
whoa, I wish I had tips.
Yeah.
I had them. So just let me say, I consider myself an investigative writer rather than investigative journalist, in the sense that I did the research for both of my books. But I did it from the perspective, from a position of a citizen investigating. I wasn't working for the New York Times, I wasn't, or the Wall Street Journal or any of those big papers. So I had written articles before, but I was always freelance. And so I was doing it from a position of, do I say weakness? Not weakness, but I really had to dig in and persuade people to talk to me and to give me the truth if they were on the opposite side of the argument that I was putting. So that was something challenging, and also one of the challenges was that after the book came out, those people who did not agree with it and those people that wanted to denigrate it would automatically point to me and my credentials and say, well, who did she work for? The New York Times? No, she didn't work.
Personal attacks. Yeah.
Personal attacks were really, really very frequent, and I had to get tough about that. So one of the things I had to do over the past 5 years is get tougher. And those attacks come in ebbs and flows, and sometimes they're really quite terrible, depending on what's going on in the news. And sometimes they're less, and I just have to let it flow over me. Okay, you can't get emotionally engaged in that. It's harder of late, I think, because if I can be careful about this and diplomatic about this, what we saw during the past 5 years with COVID was even more disinformation and misinformation being put about by those in authority and those writing for the authoritative media outlets. And seeing the enormity of that really was very depressing for me, because it felt like too big a thing to overcome.
Yep.
Then, about 6-7 months ago, we had the admission that had been going on. We had confessions by, social media people like Zuckerberg saying, yeah, the government was pressuring me to say certain things, and I'm not going to do that anymore. Whatever reasons he had for doing that, that's what he said. There were many, many revelations about the suppression of information, and yet, people are not up in arms about this.
Right.
And I don't understand why they're not up in arms.
Thank you. That makes two of us. I'm like, I don't know. Is it not in the mainstream news? I don't watch mainstream news anymore. But aren't people hearing about this? And even what, Fauci and all this, well, I guess it was made in Wuhan. And, I guess we did pay for gain of function. And
these are huge revelations.
Exactly.
Huge
I guess we did know that it wouldn't prevent transmission or getting the disease. And we said it would, and get it for your grandmother to prevent spreading it. I guess we knew it wouldn't do that. And right, admissions, like I feel the same way. Isn't anybody like, hello? And then make it worse, Jayne. And they're still believing the next thing the government's telling us. I'm like, if you had a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, whatever your persuasion is, and they lie to you, are you going to believe them next time they say something? they're a liar. Like, can you ever trust them again? Like, once someone breaks that trust, okay, so why are you believing the government? You know, like the helicopter that went down over DC, or this thing, you know, like all this weird stuff happening with the government and, you know, the Epstein files. I mean, pick it, right? So thank you. I don't know. And I think it's because,
you know, I'd love to offer you some sort of trick or tool that I use to stay positive in the face of that kind of thing. And really, it is a matter of every day just trying to remind myself that change is made one person at a time. Sometimes one admission at a time, right? So, and if I keep my mind focused on small little bits of good that I am doing, then I can feel positive. So, for instance, I went to speak to a farming group, very, very forward-thinking farmers about 6 weeks ago. They wanted to hear about my book, and they wanted to know everything about the environmental aspects that I was criticizing, as well as the health aspects. And at one point, one of the farmers came to me and he said, "Oh, I'm only halfway through your book. But I'll tell you what I did stop doing. I stopped taking a statin when I read your book."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Really, why?" He said, "Well, that chapter was so compelling to me." And I thought, well, why am I doing this? I've been told all this information that I don't think is correct. And that was a very small win on a very small issue that I had been writing about. And just to be clear for your listeners, I'm not saying nobody should ever take a statin. I'm not saying that in all cases a statin is not going to do you any good. My perspective is to just show people my approach rather is to show people the range of information, the reality of the information about how much good it does most people. Mm-hmm. Most people do not benefit very much. And there are side effects that a lot of people have. So I think everyone should do the research for themselves based on their own health and their own bodies and their own tolerance for risk as well, right? Mm-hmm. And do some thinking about this. But that was just a very small example of somebody changing their behavior based on something I'd written. And I kind of felt, okay, let's take that win.
Mm-hmm. No, I can only imagine, Jayne, how many countless hundreds, if not thousands of other readers of your book had the same reaction. You just haven't heard about it.
Yeah. And sometimes they write to me, which is lovely.
Good. Yes.
Or they DM me on Twitter and say good things. And so I think, you just have to you're not going to overturn everything and change the world with one book.
That's right.
You're going to change some things and some people and hopefully move the debate forward just a little bit.
Well, let's talk about some of the findings of your book then. Like, for example, how diets that exclude animal foods can actually be damaging to your health. Because we all know, like, about the Gershon Clinic that helps people with cancer, and it's, a lot of smoothies and juices. And my understanding is with going vegetarian, it can be very beneficial and very healing to help cleanse and detoxify the body. But the bottom line is, when you do it long term is when you get into problems. Anything that you're going to do different, you start taking things out of your diet, something new to your body. Normally, the normal person is going to get pretty good reactions, no matter what it is, whether it be keto, whatever. It's something new. You're being a little more strict. You're being a little mindful, conscious. You're going to get pretty good reactions. But the bottom falls out usually after about 6 months, a year or so. And this seems to be really what happens with vegetarians is like there's like a turning point of about a year or two. Then the body starts to really break down, like enough already. So what would you want the audience to know as far as kind of like how long-term diets that exclude animal foods can be damaging?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you talk about is how people thrive for a little bit, and the little bit might be 6 months, might be a year, might even be 5 years that they thrive, because some deficiencies don't kick in until 5 years. B12, for instance, can be very latent and you won't notice the effect. But and people call that the vegan honeymoon, right?
Okay.
Which is you feel fabulous for whatever period of time, and then something hits. So it is a fact that vegan diets, again and again in numerous studies, have been shown to be deficient in things like vitamin A, vitamin B12, iodine, zinc, iron,
Creatine.
D3, which is the form of vitamin D that we need, and EPA, DHA, which is the fatty acids that come from omega-3. So studies, in fact, I just came across one today, which reminded me of this. I think it was 2016 or something, which showed very definitively these deficiencies, which are very high in a vegan diet and slightly less, but still high in a vegetarian diet. So the vegan diet is the one that has no animal foods whatsoever. And as many as 80% of vegans were deficient in B12 and iodine, for instance, and then 60% in iron and zinc.
Wow.
Now, the argument that is usually given is that, oh, no, but we know about all that now, and we just take supplements.
Right.
Well, if we know about this, then why are these deficiencies still there? People obviously can't get the supplements because of, accessibility, where they live, how much money they have, whatever. Or those supplements are not working effectively within their body. So if you're one of those people, you're going to suffer. And the vitamin A problem is a very good way of illustrating this, because people assume that you can get vitamin A from carrots. But in fact, the form of vitamin A in carrots, as you will well know, is a beta carotene, which has to be converted to the kind of vitamin A that we can use in our body. Conversion is not very good for anyone. So you only get a certain percentage of that. I think it's 10% converts. But in addition to that, 50% of the population cannot convert. So if you are one of those 50% and you're relying on carrots to get your vitamin A, you're going to be deficient by definition. You're going to have a problem. And vitamin A is very serious. It's important for eyesight, immune function. You need it to metabolize other nutrients.
Anti-cancer.
Yes. So this is not a joke. Vitamin deficiencies are not a joke. And I find it fairly astonishing that on the one hand, studies come out repeatedly showing that not only are vegans, vegetarians deficient, but even omnivores are sometimes deficient in some of these important nutrients.
Yeah.
But how can we, as a matter of policy, be then recommending plant-based diets which don't have any of those nutrients in them?
They're not even real food to begin with. Like, the body doesn't even recognize. I mean, what is that? Like, it's a totally processed thing that's not natural in nature that your body can't recognize, therefore can't process. So that's the second half of it. So you got to detoxify what you think you're doing for food, and it's not really food.
Sorry, there's something else to do with brain function, which I think is also important to mention.
Yes.
And there are a couple of people doing excellent work on this. One of them is Dr. Georgia Ede, who's a psychiatrist. Another one is Maria Cross, who is a nutritionist. They've both written about the foods that are important for brain health. And those foods, the nutrients that are important are things like iodine, D3, DHA, EPA, B12 for brain function. We think of neurological function in B12, but it's really very important for the brain. So they conclude that you need to get these nutrients from somewhere, and it's probably best to get them from animal foods because they come in the right form. It's very, very difficult to get them if you're not including animal foods. So again, we have this crisis of mental health acknowledged around the world. We have teen anxiety on the rise, depression on the rise. We have at the other end of the spectrum, we've got dementia and Alzheimer's really on the rise.
Depression.
And I don't see very much in the mainstream about the nutrient base of these illnesses and why our diets may be contributing to those. And I would love to see more discussion of that. And those two ladies are also people you could get on your podcast and have a really great discussion. Dr. Eid and Maria Cross. They speak so eloquently about what goes on in the brain and why we need the nutrients that are found in animal foods for that.
Well, I got to tell you, being a nutritionist for over 3 decades, I've got a library full of books
I bet you do.
from bionutritionists and even psychiatrists. Barbara Reed Stitt, I'm sure you're familiar with her work. I mean, it's very well documented, the association between nutrient deficiencies and behavior, and particularly criminal behavior. I'll try to put those in the show notes, but they actually talked about studies of prisoners and stuff when they tested deficient in, like you said it, B12 in particular, the B vitamins. They had a direct correlation with violent behavior, anxiety, mood problems, all of that, anger. I mean, just outbursts, quick triggers, like flying off the handle. I mean, come on. I always say to people, it's like, oh, and bipolar disorder is another one.
Yes.
Right? I mean, what do you think your brain, your body, your cells, your organs, your systems is made of? You have to give it the fuel it requires in order to do what it's designed to do. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem and it's not going to function right. Because, people always blame genetics. Well, my mother had this problem. My grandmother had this problem. Now I have this problem. And then medication is the way and all this stuff. And, no one's saying don't go medications, but it's just we've got to look at the epigenetics and the evidence that is very, very strong about how our environment, our lifestyle, our beliefs directly affect what we're getting biologically. It's just you can't deny it.
And we even see evidence that even when you have these conditions, they can be either reversed or much ameliorated by suddenly introducing these foods.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Eid has done a research paper with a number of other professionals looking at the impact of the ketogenic diet, for instance, on schizophrenia. It's also been done for bipolar.
Epilepsy.
And it makes a huge difference.
And epilepsy, right? The keto
epilepsy
diet?
is a well-known treatment plan for that. Yeah.
So then let's just circle back what I had mentioned in the beginning. I hear this a lot. I'm sure you do too. What would you say, considering you wrote a book on this, to the person who says, I'm vegan because I don't support animal cruelty, and I also believed it's better for the environment as well as my health. That's why I'm vegan. Oh, and not to mention my mother died of a heart attack or something like that. What would you say to someone like that? Again, very compassionate person who wants to be healthy and doesn't want to hurt anything that's alive.
Well, I would say that I respect their desire not to hurt something and to protect animals. I do respect that. And I understand the emotional aspect of that decision as well. And I would say, And if they were still talking to me after I'd said that, then I would say, but, maybe you should consider some of the information available now, which may not have been available to you when you made that decision, which suggests that actually meat eating, if you're eating the right kind of meat, is not harming the environment. And meat eating is certainly not harming your health when it's in the context of a whole food approach to diet. And then if they're still talking to me, I would go into detail around each of those things. But one of the things that really does stop people in their tracks, if you talk about, okay, how do I persuade people? This happened about a year and a half ago. I was talking to a group of young people and I asked them, what percentage of global greenhouse gas emissions do you think are caused by livestock?
Wow.
And they gave me answers upwards of 50%, 75%. And I said to them, would it surprise you to know that actually the real number, which came out last year from the FAO, is 11%? And they were all completely shocked by that, completely shocked. And I think it's because they had got their original number from that movie Cowspiracy, which came out in 2015. That number was repeated and repeated and repeated. And in fact, I still see it sometimes used in protests when you see people walking around with signs, placards to give up meat at university campuses. You see that number. So that's usually enough to get them to think, oh gosh, maybe I don't really know the full picture here. And then if they're interested, then I can point them to other sources which demonstrate that even that 11% number that we talk about is an exaggerated number for various reasons. Various things go into that number, which mean that livestock is not being compared favorably and fairly with other sectors or other forms of food. So, there are all kinds of things that are wrong with the numbers, but you have to have somebody be interested in learning about that before you can even begin to go down that route. There has to be an open door.
100%, because I know people, very good friends of mine whose husbands and wives or whatever, people in their lives have watched those documentaries and like Game Changers and some of these other vegetarian based promotion documentaries on Netflix and different things. And many of them, Jayne, to this day, they won't eat meat because these documentaries did a very good job and they look very impressive and okay. And again, very compassionate people. They want to be healthy. They don't want to hurt anything. And to this day, they're still eating vegetarian. Meanwhile, they're way overweight. And I'd love for you to speak to directly for men and why men in particular have to be very careful if they're deciding to go vegetarian because of the testosterone issue and their muscle mass going down and them getting a little bit effeminate because their estrogen goes up, not to mention sometimes they eat the non-foods like the fake meats and the soy burgers and all this stuff, which increases the fake estrogens in their bodies. So they get very effeminate. They wonder why they can't get off the couch and they're not motivated and they're losing muscle. They have no sex drive, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I just try to bite my tongue like, okay, you can't talk to them because they feel like, no, I watched that documentary and I'm vegan now, or I don't want to eat meat. And it's like, oh my gosh, once certain people get an idea in their head, and gosh, you know what? I'm probably guilty of it too. I'm sure, right? I probably have my things where I'm like, nope, I know the answer, right? But I guess the point is if your body, your report card is presenting a different story, you've got to read the tea leaves and be brave enough to revisit your belief system. Like, I'm overweight. I can't get out of bed. I have ADD. I can't focus. I'm not motivated to work out. My body hurts in the morning. I got bad skin. I mean, pick it, right? Like you've got to at some point be like, I've got to be doing something. My body is trying to tell me this is not working. So let me go through elimination and figure it out.
Yeah. So you can't make somebody reach that point, can you?
No.
You can only, they reach it and for all kinds of different reasons. And there are countless stories of converted vegans and converted vegetarians who eventually did reach a point. Usually the point is one of terrible collapse. Mm-hmm. The story of, I don't know if you know James the carnivorist. He lives in Bermuda and he used to be a vegan and he does a podcast as well. And he just had a total health breakdown before he converted. Same with Leara Keith, who was a very prominent vegan and then wrote her book called The Vegetarian Myth in 2014 because her health had collapsed. Her spine had collapsed through B12 deficiency, more or less.
Scary.
So, but we don't want people to reach that point of collapse. We would love to get to them before.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the secret is except to drop small bits of information in at a time. One of the things I often do when people say to me, but that Game Changers, that was such a good documentary and it showed that you can really be healthy and muscular on a plant-based diet. One of the things I do is point them to an excellent 3-part dissection of the game changers, which was written at the time by a nutritionist called Tim Reese. And
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's a contact of mine. He's very funny as well. And his diagnosis is incredibly funny as well, his critique rather. It takes apart every single study in the game changers and explains what it really means.
Excellent.
And it doesn't mean what they say it means, basically.
Never does.
The
Never
overwhelming
does.
message.
Mm-hmm.
And then, to your point about men, I think you have to focus on, there is the estrogen thing, the risk. You're quite right. An estrogen overload will happen if they eat excess amounts of soy, which is usually the protein substitute of choice for vegans. And there are studies about that. But I think maybe the key to converting a man is to think about, okay, what builds muscle? You need, if you want to be muscular, if you want to be strong, and I don't mean bodybuilding strong, I mean fit for life strong, longevity strong. Yeah. You need to build muscle. What do you need? You need amino acids. You need 9 essential amino acids from protein. Okay, what foods have those 9 essential amino acids? Oh, animal foods are the only ones. Well, what happens if you want to get those amino acids from plant-based sources of protein? Your chickpeas, your spinach, your mountains of quinoa, that kind of thing. What you end up doing to get your protein is you end up overloading on carbohydrates. What do carbohydrates do? They push up glucose, blood levels, and insulin. You get, and so you create a tendency towards insulin resistance where it might not have existed before. So I think it's, in a way, you just have to talk somebody through, if you can, the logical progression of health or ill health if you're giving up something essential like the 9 essential amino acids from a protein. Because I don't think people understand fully what protein is giving them. And what it is giving them is you can't build muscle if you haven't got the components. And you can't keep muscle if you haven't got the components. So the idea that you can just eat anything and then work out and still be, muscular to any degree, I think is to a large extent a fallacy.
But what about the argument they say they're combining the right proteins together to make complete amino acids? What would you say?
And they can. So you can combine rice and beans, for example. Yeah. Cool. But you're going to be eating a mountain of rice and beans.
A lot of carbs.
And a lot of carbs. It's also very bad for your digestion. So you're getting a real excess of fiber there.
And high in toxins. They're very high in GMOs, corn, wheat, soy, very high in GMOs and pesticides and all that. So you're getting a whole boatload of all this other stuff that you definitely don't want in addition to the blood sugar spike.
Yeah. And I think, again, in going gently with people to talk about this, because you really can't hit people over the head, especially if they have philosophical views about what they want to eat. You have to be respectful of that. It's about just asking the questions. Oh, okay. How do you handle that overload of carbs? How do you handle the toxins? Right. Maybe it doesn't impact you. Maybe it does. Did you know that this can happen? I mean, toxins from plants, full stop, is a surprise to people when you talk about it.
Right.
Right.
How about the phytates and the
oxalate?
Acid? Yeah, and the oxalates like spinach and kale and all this stuff. I mean, people don't even know, like, plants, because they're immobile. They're not like animals. They can get and run. And a little rabbit can run away, right? A plant is stuck in the ground. So nature, in its wise design, made certain repel. Thank you.
The predator.
From eating them. I mean,
Yeah.
the plant actually like squirts them out in the air. I mean, so nature's really smart. But the thing is, people don't know that. So whether we eat the leaves, we eat the plants, and you're having a raw smoothie or a raw salad, not only are you getting all that GMO pesticide crap, but you're getting all those raw natural plant repellent toxins that the plant doesn't want you, the mammal, to eat it. Because the plant is alive. I mean, we know for sure plants are alive. They're sentient beings. I mean, we've done research with, the global field, and one of my most popular shows was with Monica, and she's a plant botanist and researcher, and how plants are intelligent and plants communicate and plants have families, and through the bacterial ground and the soil and their root systems, and trees have families and they protect each other and they share nutrition in the ground, and it's crazy. They're just as much alive as animals and mammals are. So, and to your point you mentioned earlier, which, it definitely warrants repeating, you ask any farmer who tills the soil and turns crops, I mean, all the little animals that are caught in the rotisserie reels and brought down by the axes and the trees, and it's total carnage for these plant crops. And people don't know that when they're hanging their hat on, I'm vegan to save animals I love. Because let me tell you something, no one loves animals more than me.
No, but you seem to have lots.
I do. I'm up to my eyeballs in animals. But I'll tell you what, too, I also know enough about the circle of life and birth and life and death and rebirth, and how that's how we got here. And our bodies become the soil, and the soil then becomes the plants, and the plants get eaten by the animals. And it's the circle of life. And it's how it's been for centuries and eons, and how it's designed to be. So we would not be here without that circle of life if we only ate plants, So anyway, this has been amazing, Jayne. I knew we were going to get up the time on this. I'm so glad I had you agree to come back to talk about the ending the mother war, which is just as important, but on a whole different track. But before I let you go, any final thoughts or things that you definitely want people to know to kind of wrap up this discussion?
I guess I would like people to think about what is the point of food? Why do we eat? And for me, the whole point of eating, aside from the social aspect and the enjoyment aspect, which of course we do acknowledge, the whole point really is nutrition. It's to make ourselves the best that we can be, and to give ourselves a fighting chance in this world of being healthy and living long, healthy lives. So I would ask people, when they're trying to make decisions about what to eat and what is right and what is wrong, to put nutrition first. And that helps you sort out all of the other issues, to be honest. Because if we were not made to eat something for its nutrition, then we would, we wouldn't be eating it. So it's a rationale that is put there. It's a bigger picture rationale, which is, what do we need to nourish ourselves? It should be our first priority.
I think that's just so beautifully said, because, everyone knows the saying, you are what you eat, right? And your brain, your body, it's not going to work right if you're not giving it the nutrients it needs. And I'll also just mention too, in closing, that people have to keep in mind that, back in ancient cultures, there was a ritual behind, hunting and bringing down an animal. And it was always done with the most supreme respect and appreciation and gratitude and reverence. And, they went through a whole ceremony before they went out on a hunt. And whatever animal they brought down, they prayed over that animal. They thanked that animal for sacrificing its life that would then enable the tribe to live. Which means its life kept going, because its life then became the people. because my life, my body right here with you today is a result. I'm the living example of what I just ate, now still alive in me, able to make my brain work well so I can articulate points that hopefully make sense to someone, that can inspire them to then go out and be their best. And this is how life continues. Even though a life might have ended, a life continues. And this is the circle of things. So we have to keep that in mind, that it's all about, just having an appreciation, a gratitude, a mindfulness about respecting life and just being smart about what it takes to keep life going, both ours and others.
Yeah. And I think we can do that even though we're no longer hunting that animal and pulling it down ourselves and going through the ceremony with our small group of people. We can, and I think it's a really good point you made, we can implement a form of gratitude and careful choice, thoughtfulness around the way we choose those animal foods, and be grateful for them, choose them well, choose them from the best sources we can possibly choose, be grateful for them, acknowledge what they're doing to us and for us when we.
So that would be not buying conventional meats, back to we said in the beginning, that
if you can, if you can afford to, if you have choices, make those choices.
True. Yes. And even, what happened to praying over your food, right? Nothing to do with religion. It's just about bringing your consciousness to taking a pause, to acknowledging that what you are now going to put in your body and is going to become you once was alive, whether it be green or red or whatever. It was once alive, and you're grateful. Thank you for giving your life for me. That alone, if everybody did that, would change the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very true.
Jayne Buxton, thank you so very much. Where can we find you in your wonderful book, The Great Plant-Based Con?
Well, the book is available like always on Amazon and at other bookstores. I have a website called the Great Plant-Based Con, where I have other information, articles I've written, podcasts I've been on, and also all the references for the book, which people might be interested in checking to make sure. So that's there. And I'm on Twitter under Jayne Reese Buxton. And I like receiving direct messages from people. If they're interested in dialogue or ask me a question, I'm very happy to answer them.
So excellent. Yes, I'll say you have almost 1,500 references in your book. So for those who think it's a bunch of hooey, right? Jayne, do you have any books coming in the future?
I don't at the moment. I've been very busy talking about this book and just working and parading, farmers groups and around the country talking about it. I'm working on thinking about it. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but I'll keep you posted.
I'm sure it will develop organically from what you're doing now, probably with the farmers and helping take you to the next level of, all right, how do we do this? You know what I mean? How do we? Yeah, I love it. It's beautiful. Well, promoting your book, I'm sure, is a full-time job, but it's very important. Super grateful you took the time to come on the show. I'm really excited to have you back to talk about your other life and your other expertise.
Yeah, thank you
so much.
Really great to meet you.
Thank you, Jayne. And thank you, everyone, for listening to the show. And please share this with someone you think needs to hear it. Check out those wonderful resources. And thanks for being part of the solution. We all want to be healthy and take care of the planet together. See you next time, everybody.